The 4 a.m. alarm was a cruel, relentless shriek in the quiet dark. For Lena Washington, it wasn't a signal to wake up, but rather a reminder that she hadn't truly slept. She silenced it with a weary hand, the cracked plastic of the old clock cool against her palm. For a moment, she lay still in her small bedroom, listening to the hum of the aging refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant rumble of the first trucks on the highway. This was her world, a symphony of survival, played on a loop. Sunlight was still a distant promise as she moved through her morning ritual. A splash of cold water to her face, chasing away the ghosts of restless dreams filled with overdue bills and the ever-present fear of the landlord's knock. She pulled on her faded uniform for the corner spoon diner, the faint scent of grease and stale coffee clinging to the fabric no matter how many times she washed it. In the kitchen, the reality of her finances stared back at her from the near-empty refrigerator. A quarter-gallon of milk, 3 eggs, and a small block of cheese. Enough for her son, Marcus, but not for her. She started the coffee maker, the gurgling sound a small comfort, and measured out a single scoop of coffee grounds, stretching the supply. She'd drink the weak, watery stuff at the diner. A soft shuffling sound came from the hallway. Marcus, her 10-year-old son, appeared in the doorway, his eyes still heavy with sleep. He was the reason for the 4 a.m. alarms, the double shifts, the aching feet. He was her whole world. "Morning, Mama," he mumbled, shuffling over to hug her waist. Lena's heart clenched with a love so fierce it almost hurt. She smoothed down his hair, her tired face softening into a genuine smile. "Morning, sweet boy. You hungry? I can make you some scrambled eggs." "With cheese?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "Of course, with cheese," she said, her own stomach twisting with a dull ache of hunger she had long learned to ignore. Every bite for him was a victory for her. As he ate at their small, wobbly kitchen table, a textbook propped open beside his plate, Lena packed his lunch, a cheese sandwich on the last of the bread, an apple, and a small carton of milk she'd taken from the diner the day before, a tiny crime that felt like a mountain of guilt. She looked at the stack of bills on the counter, a silent, menacing tower of paper. Rent was due in 3 days. The electric bill was a week past due. Marcus needed new sneakers, his current ones had a hole in the sole that he tried to patch with duct tape. The weight of it all was a physical presence, a heavy cloak she could never take off. "Did I do the right thing?" she whispered to herself, a question she asked every single day since her husband had left 2 years ago, leaving nothing behind but a note and a mountain of debt. The answer was always the same: she was doing the only thing she could. She had to survive for Marcus. She kissed her son goodbye as he headed for the school bus, his backpack slung over his shoulder. "Be good, listen to your teacher," she called after him. "I will, Mama. Love you." "Love you more," she whispered, watching until the bus turned the corner. Then, she plastered on her public face, a weary but determined smile, and began the long walk to the diner. The corner spoon was a relic of a bygone era. The red vinyl booths were scarred with cracks and fissures, patched haphazardly with silver duct tape. The checkered linoleum floor was worn down to a dull gray in the pathways between the tables and the counter. The air was a permanent mixture of frying bacon, strong coffee, and the faint scent of bleach. But for Lena, it was more than a diner. It was a battlefield where she fought for her survival, one filled coffee cup, one cleared plate, one meager tip at a time. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, was a man whose smile never reached his cold, calculating eyes. He was a small man with a big ego, obsessed with the diner's family-friendly reputation. He watched the staff like a hawk, quick to criticize a slow order or a less-than-gleaming countertop. He'd made it clear from day one that Lena, as the only black waitress on staff, had to work twice as hard to prove herself. He never said it outright, but it was there in the way he double-checked her tables, the way his compliments were always backhanded, the way he seemed to scrutinize her every move. The lunch rush had been a blur of controlled chaos. Orders shouted, plates clattering, the sizzle of the grill, and the constant murmur of conversations. Now, as the clock ticked past 2, a comfortable lull settled over the diner. A few regulars nursed their coffees at the counter. Sunlight streamed through the large front windows, illuminating the lazy dance of dust motes in the air. It should have been an ordinary, blessedly quiet afternoon. Lena was refilling the salt shakers, her body aching with a deep-seated exhaustion, when the sound began. It started as a low, distant rumble, a vibration felt more than heard. It grew steadily, a guttural growl that rattled the coffee cups on their saucers. Customers paused, forks halfway to their mouths. Mr. Henderson peered anxiously out the window, his brow furrowed. The rumble swelled into a deafening roar as a wave of motorcycles descended upon the diner's parking lot. One by one, they pulled in, dozens of them. Harleys, choppers, massive machines of chrome and steel that gleamed menacingly in the afternoon sun. The men who dismounted were just as intimidating. They were a sea of black leather, weathered denim, and heavy boots. Their jackets were adorned with patches, the most prominent being the snarling, skeletal emblem of the Hells Angels. Tattoos snaked up their necks and covered their arms, telling stories of miles traveled and lines crossed. The atmosphere inside the corner spoon shifted instantly. The comfortable silence was replaced by a tense, nervous hush. The regulars at the counter stopped their chatter, their eyes wide. A family in a corner booth quickly gathered their things, the mother shielding her children's eyes as she hurried them out the door. Another waitress, a young woman named Becky, froze behind the counter, her face pale. Mr. Henderson stiffened, his face a mask of panic and disgust. "Lock the door," he hissed at Becky, but it was too late. The bell above the door jingled, a ridiculously cheerful sound in the thick, anxious air. The leader of the group, a mountain of a man with a long, graying beard and a face that looked like it was carved from granite, pushed the door open and stepped inside. He was followed by nearly 20 of his brethren, who filled the entrance and cast long, imposing shadows across the worn floor. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Don't serve them," a man at the counter muttered, sliding off his stool. "They're nothing but trouble." He threw a few dollars on the counter and practically ran out. Mr. Henderson's eyes darted around the room, seeing his precious reputation evaporating before his eyes. He shot Lena a panicked, angry look, as if their very presence was her fault. The other staff members seemed to shrink into the background, trying to become invisible. Lena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Fear was a cold knot in her stomach. She had heard the stories, the rumors that painted these men as monsters, agents of chaos and violence. Her every instinct screamed at her to hide, to run, to protect herself. But then she looked past the leather and the tattoos, past the fearsome reputation. She saw men who were dusty and tired from the road. She saw the lines of exhaustion etched around their eyes. She saw one of them, a younger man, gently help an older, grizzled member into a booth, making sure he was comfortable before sitting down himself. They weren't sneering or looking for a fight. They were just hungry. In that moment, they weren't a notorious biker gang. They were customers. And serving customers was her job. It was how she fed Marcus. While everyone else remained frozen in fear or judgment, Lena took a deep breath, untied and retied her apron in a single, decisive gesture. She grabbed a stack of menus and her notepad. Her hands trembled slightly, a betrayer of the calm she was trying to project. She walked toward the two booths the bikers had occupied at the back of the diner. Every step felt a mile long, the silence in the room so profound she could hear the scuff of her worn-out sneakers on the linoleum. She stopped at the first booth, where the leader sat. She forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as fragile as it felt. "Welcome to the Corner Spoon," she said, her voice softer than she intended, but steady. "What can I get for y'all today?" The leader looked up at her. His eyes were a startlingly clear blue, and they held a piercing intelligence that took her by surprise. He studied her for a long moment, and Lena felt herself being measured, weighed. He glanced at her name tag. "Lena," he read aloud, his voice a low gravelly rumble. He then looked at his men, a silent communication passing between them. A younger biker with a scar running through his eyebrow grunted, "Just coffee." Black. But the leader held up a hand. "Hold on," he said, his gaze returning to Lena. "We'll all have coffee to start. And you got any of that apple pie left? The one in the case looks homemade." To her astonishment, and the hushed shock of the rest of the diner, the bikers treated her with a quiet, gruff courtesy. They said, "Please," they said, "Thank you, ma'am." When she brought the pot of coffee, the leader, who they called Grizz, made a small joke about needing it strong enough to strip paint. The men laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the very walls, but it wasn't a menacing sound. It was just laughter. Lena found herself relaxing, the knot of fear in her stomach slowly unclenching. She took their orders, burgers, steaks, platters of fries, and served them with the same quiet efficiency and warmth she offered everyone. She noticed their coffee cups were half empty and refilled them without being asked. When she brought out their food, she added an extra basket of bread and butter to each table, on the house. She didn't do it for a big tip or for praise. She did it because it was the right thing to do. In her eyes, they weren't symbols of fear, they were weary travelers, human beings in need of a hot meal and a moment of peace. But as she returned to the counter to ring in another order, Mr. Henderson cornered her near the kitchen doors, his face a blotchy, furious red. "Clara," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" "My name is Lena," she corrected him calmly. "And I'm doing my job, Mr. Henderson." "Your job," he sputtered, his voice low and venomous. "Your job is to protect the reputation of this establishment. Do you have any idea who those people are? They're animals. You're driving away my regulars. My family customers. They've been nothing but polite," Lena argued, keeping her voice even despite the anger rising in her chest. "They ordered food, they're paying customers. They deserve to be treated with respect, just like anyone else." "Respect?" Henderson scoffed, his lip curling in a sneer. "You don't give respect to vermin. You get them out before they infest the place. I don't want their kind here. I don't want their money." The conversation ended there. Lena knew there was nothing more to say. She finished her shift in a tense silence, acutely aware of Henderson's glare following her every move. The bikers finished their meal, paid their bill in cash at the register, and left a tip on the table that was more than Lena usually made in an entire shift. As they filed out, Grizz paused at the door and looked directly at her. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant, a silent acknowledgement of her kindness. That evening, after the last table was wiped down and the chairs were flipped upside down for mopping, Mr. Henderson called her into his tiny, cluttered office. He didn't ask her to sit. He stood behind his desk, his arms crossed, his face set like concrete. He slid a thin, white envelope across the desk. It contained her final paycheck, with no severance. "You're done here, Lena," he said, the words cold and final. "I can't have an employee who deliberately disobeys my unspoken orders and puts this entire diner at risk. You have a bleeding heart, and it's a liability. You're fired." Lena stood frozen, the words hitting her like a physical blow. Fired. Fired for serving customers. Fired for being kind. A wave of desperation washed over her. "Mr. Henderson, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I have a son. I need this job. I can't lose this job. Should have thought of your son before you decided to welcome the dregs of society into my establishment," he said, turning his back on her to shuffle some papers. The dismissal was absolute. The walk home was a blur of shame and terror. Each step on the cracked sidewalk echoed the questions hammering in her mind. What am I going to do? How will I pay the rent? How will I feed Marcus? The weight of her uncertainty was crushing, a physical pressure on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Had she done the right thing? In her heart, she knew she had. But her heart couldn't pay the bills. When she opened the door to her apartment, Marcus was at the table, diligently working on his math homework. He looked up and smiled, a bright, innocent light in her darkening world. "Hi, Mama. How was work?" Lena's own smile felt like a cheap, fragile mask. She couldn't let him see her despair. She couldn't let her fear become his. "It was fine, honey. Let's see what we've got for dinner." That night, after a meager meal of the last 3 scrambled eggs, Lena lay awake, staring at the ceiling as tears streamed silently down her temples and into her hair. The fear she had held back all day consumed her, a cold, dark tide pulling her under. The next morning, Lena woke with eyes swollen from crying. She went through the motions, making Marcus cereal with the last of the milk, her mind a frantic storm of worry. She had to find a job, today. She scanned the classifieds in the local paper, circling 2 listings, a cleaning position at a motel and another dishwashing job. The pay was less, the hours worse, but it was something. By midday, as she was trying to summon the courage to start making calls, a familiar sound broke the neighborhood's quiet. It started as a low rumble, the same one from the day before, but this time it was different. It wasn't just a dozen engines, it was a symphony of them, a rolling thunder that grew and grew until it seemed to shake the very foundations of her apartment building. Curious neighbors peered out from behind their curtains. People stepped onto their porches, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. Lena's heart leaped into her throat. She crept to her own window and looked out. Her breath caught. It wasn't 20 bikes. It was an ocean of them. 100 motorcycles, maybe more, stretched down her entire street and around the corner, a river of polished chrome and black leather that gleamed under the midday sun. They had blocked the entire road. At the front of the procession, dismounting and walking with a quiet, determined purpose toward her small apartment building, was Grizz and the same group she had served yesterday. For a terrifying second, panic seized her. Had she done something wrong? Had she offended them? Was Henderson right? She thought of Marcus, who was safely at school, and a primal fear for his safety shot through her. She stepped onto her small, weathered porch, her body trembling. The bikers stopped at the bottom of her steps, an intimidating wall of leather and muscle. The entire neighborhood was watching in stunned silence. Grizz stepped forward from the group. He wasn't carrying a weapon. In one large, calloused hand, he held a bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grew on the side of the highway. In the other, he held a thick, bulging envelope. Other bikers began unloading things from their saddlebags, heavy grocery bags overflowing with food, sacks of potatoes and onions, cartons of milk and juice, and even a brand new pair of boys' basketball sneakers, exactly in Marcus's size. Grizz's voice, when he spoke, was strong and gentle, carrying easily through the silent street. "Lena Washington." She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. "One of my boys was finishing his coffee at the counter yesterday when your boss took you in the back," he explained. "The walls in that place are paper thin. We heard everything. We heard him fire you for treating us like human beings." He took a step closer, his blue eyes locking with hers. "That ain't right," he said, the simple words carrying an immense weight. "In our world, loyalty and respect are everything. You showed us respect when all we got were stares and whispers. You gave us kindness when your boss wanted to give us the boot. That kind of decency, that kind of heart, it shouldn't cost a person their livelihood. It should be rewarded." One by one, his men walked up the steps and gently set down the bags of groceries on her porch. Fresh vegetables, meat, bread, pasta, canned goods, and a large box of school supplies for Marcus. The last biker set down a giant, ridiculously oversized teddy bear. Finally, Grizz handed Lena the envelope. Her hands shook as she took it. I don't understand," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Why are you doing all this? Because yesterday, you weren't just a waitress and we weren't just bikers, Grizz said, his voice firm. You were a good person, and we were hungry people. You did the right thing. This morning, we all passed a helmet around. Every single one of us. It's for you and your boy. To get you back on your feet. No one should be punished for being good. Lena opened the envelope. Inside was a thick stack of cash, more money than she had seen in her entire life. More than she could have earned in a year of working double shifts at the corner spoon. A sob broke from her chest, a sound of overwhelming shock and gratitude. The tears she had cried in fear the night before were now tears of unbelievable relief. Word of what happened on that quiet residential street spread like a shockwave. A neighbor had filmed the entire scene on their phone, and by evening, the video was all over local news websites. Waitress fired for serving Hell's Angels, biker gang returns to save her, the story went viral. Strangers from all over the country began sending messages of support. Job offers poured in, from restaurants, from offices, from people who just wanted someone with her kind of integrity working for them. A local community fund was started in her name. Lena eventually accepted a management position at a new, family-owned cafe on the other side of town, a place where her story was known and her kindness was celebrated as her greatest asset. Customers came in specifically to meet the woman who had served the bikers with a smile, and they left generous tips, not out of pity, but out of respect. A week later, Lena heard that Mr. Henderson had sold the corner spoon. The story goes that after the bikers left her apartment, all 100 of them had ridden back to the diner and filled every single seat. They didn't order anything. They just sat there, in complete silence, for 3 hours, staring at him. No one else came in. The next day, a "for sale" sign was in the window. That night, as Lena tucked Marcus into bed in their small apartment, which now felt warm and full of hope, he looked up at her. The new basketball sneakers were on the floor by his bed, and the giant teddy bear sat in the corner, a silent, fluffy guardian. Those men seemed scary at first, Mama, he said quietly. But they were nice. Lena smoothed his hair back, her heart full. They were, sweet boy. Never judge people by what they look like on the outside. You look at their hearts. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. And remember this, no matter what happens in life, no matter what anyone tells you, kindness is never, ever a mistake. It's the strongest thing in the world. Sometimes, it just takes a little while to see the good it brings back to you.